When people have discovered a greater purpose in life, they may be uncertain of what to do with that discovery. In today's lesson, we see that in spite of immaturity and imperfections, the disciples had a strong desire to learn from Jesus and follow him, and Jesus entrusted them to share his message and ministry. The Gospels portray the disciples as those who were dedicated to Jesus, although they were often slow to learn and quick to retaliate, not unlike the rest of us. Since God used such unlikely people to turn the world upside down after Christ's resurrection and the advent of the Holy Spirit, we should be encouraged, especially in times when we may feel we do not merit the title of disciple. And that brings us to our key verse for today, which reads, Jesus called his 12 disciples together and gave them authority to cast out evil spirits and to heal every kind of disease and illness. Matthew chapter 10, verse 1. Jesus chose his disciples from a variety of backgrounds and life experiences. It's notable that Matthew, a tax collector in the employment of Rome, and as such regarded as a traitor, was in the same group with Simon the Canaanite, elsewhere called Simon the Zealot, and presumably a nationalist. Even then, as we do today, people associated based on their political leanings, and each person refused to see the other as a true believer. In the presence of Jesus, men who would otherwise have been enemies became friends, willing to sacrifice for one another and live together, embracing one another. The disciples' apparent common characteristic was that none of them was privileged or from backgrounds of high socioeconomic status. They were ordinary people with neither academic attainments nor social pedigrees and advantages, but through Jesus they would do extraordinary things. Doubtless, the Lord sees in every person not only what that person is, but also what he can make him or her. These disciples were chosen not only for what they were, but also for what they were capable of becoming under Christ's influence and in his power. Therefore, no one can say, I have nothing to offer. We all have something to offer to Jesus, and he can transform and use it for his glory and greatness. The ministry is not a profession. It is a calling and a commission from Christ. Those who chose to be ministers without a true call and commissioning of the Lord will find themselves ministering primarily in their own strength. Such people will also find their heart empty, feeling the constant pressure of having to come up with ideas and programs through human ability. Jesus not only called the 12 to a mission, he also gave them the power to do it. The same principle holds true today. Whom God calls, God equips. Your equipping may not be completely evident before the ministry begins, but it will be evident along the way. Jesus charged his disciples nothing, and he expected them to minister unto others without charge. The foundational principle was freely you have received, freely give. Once we commit to following Jesus and walking in our purpose for him, we must also be prepared for criticism and disapproval. Often this negative feedback can be debilitating and cause us to doubt our call and purpose. We need to be aware that sometimes criticism and judgment against us really has nothing to do with us. Although some criticism is unavoidable and sometimes hurtful, we can encourage ourselves to remember that God is our defense and vindicator, to keep our peace, and to pray for those who unjustly criticize us. Criticism can be a blessing or a curse, depending on how we respond to it. Here's our lesson. Jesus called his 12 disciples. He didn't draft them or bargain for them or even accept them as volunteers. Jesus chose them to serve him in a very special way. He used their gifts, experience, knowledge, and obedience to transform lives and proclaim the kingdom of heaven. Jesus calls us today, and we too can choose to follow him. Know that God can use anyone, no matter how insignificant he or she may appear to be. Remember that God does not always call the qualified, but he will always qualify the called. Rejoice in the knowledge that God's message of salvation is for all people, regardless of race, gender, or national origin. Bless others. God has freely showered us with his blessings, and we should generously give of our time, love, and possessions.